What is going on, everyone? And welcome back to Unstoppable, the elite mind and body podcast for men. Today, we're going to discuss the science of motivation, okay? How to unlock maximum drive and focus, okay? Now, to understand motivation, we've got to understand the underlying hormone that feeds the brain's pleasure hormone, the brain's happiness hormone. We need to understand dopamine. Okay. Now, dopamine is, like I said, the brain's happiness or pleasure hormone. We get dopamine from doing literally anything, right? You can get dopamine from taking a shower. You can get dopamine from watching TV. You can get dopamine from making a sale. You can get dopamine from playing sports, shooting and scoring a goal. You can get dopamine from literally anything. So if we know that we can get dopamine from literally anything, what needs to happen to unlock maximum drive and focus in your life is you need to learn how to bypass cheap dopamine releasing activities and engineer clear and defined dopamine releasing activities. Okay. So what do I mean by bypass and engineer? First and foremost, before we actually get into that, I want to talk a little bit more about the dopamine thing, because a lot of people don't really understand what dopamine truly is. Yes, it's a chemical. Yes, it's in your brain. Yes, it's secreted whenever you do anything good or you get an achievement or whatever it is. But dopamine is the most potent, what's the word I'm looking for? It's literally the most potent tool, the strongest tool that we can possibly use to keep ourselves motivated, driven, focused, hungry for success. Okay. But it's also the most dangerous thing that resides in our brain. Okay. Because dopamine, if you don't engineer specific ways to get dopamine, your brain will get dopamine from the cheapest way that it can. And a lot of times that's distractions. A lot of times that's watching too much TV. A lot of times it's playing video games. A lot of times it's cheating on your partner. A lot of times it's watching porn, wasting time. A lot of times it's literally your brain is hardwired to seek dopamine in the easiest form. Okay. Now, human beings, actually, as human beings, we've only been around for a few 100,000 years, I believe it is. And so in that few 100,000 years, that's not enough time for us to truly evolve to meet the level of technology that we have. Okay. Now, this is really important to understand before we move on, but we have not had time to adequately evolve our brains to truly be able to handle all the technology that we have. So social media, video games, movies at our fingertips, music at our fingertips, anything we want to see on the internet, R-rated or PG related, doesn't matter what it is. We have everything at our fingertips at every single moment. And so this creates an interesting situation for the brain, where the brain, you have stuff to do. You should be eating cleaner. You should be working out. You should be waking up early. You should be doing all of these things that are going to push your goals and your dreams forward. But you can't seem to find motivation, right? If that sounds like you, then what's happening right now is that you have not yet learned to bypass the cheap dopamine releasing activities that are plaguing you. And you haven't learned how to engineer dopamine from specific positive activities. Okay, so let's break this down right now. In order to bypass the cheap dopamine releasing activities, we need to have a vision for our life that's stronger than those cheap dopamine releasing activities, right? I'm going to give you a classic example. I think I gave this example yesterday also, but I'm going to give it again today with the video games. For me, video games, I've played video games my entire life. Okay. For you, it may be drinking. For you, it may be porn. For you, it may be weed. For you, it may be phone games. You know what I mean? For you, it may be anything, whatever it is, doesn't matter. My example is video games. I played video games from the time I was like, I can't even remember when I started, up until like very, very recently. And for my teenage years, my developmental years, I played video games hours and hours and hours and hours and hours a day. Okay. Now, I didn't truly stop playing video games until I built a vision for my life that was so purposeful, so powerful, and made me feel almost as if I didn't try to at least work to actualize that life, that I would be literally sick, right? In order to bypass the cheap dopamine releasing activities of alcohol, weed, vices, video games, TV, whatever your vices or cheap activities are, you need to have a vision so strong for your life that it pulls you towards it. Okay. And if without that vision, there's no way to bypass it. Right. And without reminding yourself every single day of that vision, there's no way to bypass it. Your brain will always choose that cheap dopamine constantly. That's the way we're hardwired. It's not your fault. It's nobody's fault. It's why addicts are the way that they are. It's why even when people are addicts and they go to AA or Narcotics Anonymous, and they're out of drugs for years, it's why they relapse, because they haven't yet built a life in their mind's eye, a vision for their life that's strong enough to get them in forward motion, right? That's why. So the vision is the way that we bypass the cheap dopamine. And we need to focus on reminding ourselves every single day of the vision, of our why, of why we're doing this. And in doing so and having that vision, it'll allow us to then work backwards, right? So what I like to do with every single client, what I do for myself, what I've always done is I've always had a ultimate vision for my life. It's usually a 10-year vision. I build out a 10-year vision that's so grand, so vast, so powerful, so purposeful that me just thinking about it, just visualizing it in my morning routine, I get butterflies in my stomach, because I'm like, is this even possible? You know, if this is even possible, it is worth me doing every single thing in my power and cutting out every single possible vice and focusing every single goddamn day on learning and growing and getting better as a man. Because of that vision, because it's so powerful. Reminding yourself of that vision every single day will help you to align the rest of your day's actions, align the rest of your day's choices with that higher purpose, with that higher vision. That is the only way to make lasting change with addictions. That's the only way to do it. Why do you think people relapse on food, relapse on weed, relapse on drugs, relapse on alcohol, relapse on everything? Because they don't have a stronger purpose, a stronger vision. Okay. So we've got to bypass the cheap dopamine. We've got to work backwards and say, hey, if this is the 10-year vision, what do we need to do in 5 years? Like, where do we need to be in 5 years? Where do we need to be in 1 year? Where do we need to be next quarter? Where do we need to be next week? And what do we need to do every single day in order to achieve that vision? That's the way that you bypass cheap dopamine hits. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the engineering side of it, right? Because with dopamine, we need to learn how to bypass cheap dopamine, right? We have to bypass the cheap dopamine that we're getting from vices, from the drugs, from the video games, from the alcohol, from the TV, from all that stuff. And we need to learn how to engineer specific positive dopamine releasing activities into our day that help us move our goals forward. Okay. Now, this is where we start to unlock that maximum drive and focus. This is where we start to unlock that intrinsic motivation that pushes people to do extraordinary things with little to no accountability from anyone else. It's literally just like they have that fire inside of them. I know you guys have seen it, where you look at a person, you're like, how the hell do they do it? How do they do all this stuff? How are they so present on social media? How do they have such an amazing business? How do they still have an amazing family? How do they have an amazing body? How do they have it all? It's because that person has specifically engineered specific activities that are positive in their life in all of the primary areas and linked and found a way to link dopamine to those activities, right? It's basic biohacking. It's basically biohacking. And so the way that we engineer those dopamine releasing activities is by setting very clear standards for ourselves. Okay. It's not about goals. The vision and the purpose and all that stuff, that was the bypass step. Setting clear standards is what helps us to engineer dopamine. And by standards, what I mean is don't set the goal to not drink for 90 days. Don't set the goal to only play, not play video games for a certain amount of time. Don't set the goal to stop watching TV for 6 months out of the year. Don't set goals like that. Those goals don't mean anything. They don't mean anything. What's much more powerful than a goal is a standard. Okay? Because if you have a standard for your life that is a absolute non-fucking negotiable, then you will keep that standard 10 times out of 10. That's the way standards work. So the standard for yourself, let's say it's 5 days a week in the gym, 5 days a week of exercise. That's the standard. Yeah, you can do 6. Yeah, you can do 7. Yeah, you can do some extra cardio, but 5 is the absolute standard. Below that is absolutely unacceptable, right? Let's say that's one of your standards. Let's say another one of your standards is only drinking red wine for alcohol and only drinking that red wine on date night with your wife. So you're not partying, you're not out there acting a fool, you're not out there being an idiot. You have a standard that you adhere to, right? Another great standard would be something like being like, the standard for TV is I only watch TV on the weekends, or I only play video games on the weekends. And it's only allocated to one movie on the weekends or 2 hours of video games on the weekends total. That is it. It's linked to a timer, and that time is deliberately spent to enjoy that specific activity, that specific dopamine releasing activity, right? You need to engineer standards into your life that you absolutely do not negotiate with, okay? And in having those standards, it's going to allow you to start getting dopamine from the right areas, okay? And let me explain to you why. This is where it gets really interesting. Dopamine can be released from anything, okay? From anything. Literally clicking this pen, okay? I know you can't see it if you're on the podcast, but clicking this pen, I can get dopamine from this. So if I hardwired my brain over the matter of weeks to this was my form of leisure after I was done with my work, and then I go and I sit down and I start clicking this pen, I could hardwire my brain to want to click this pen all day long. That's why dopamine is so exciting, okay? Because if you can understand it, you can engineer it. And if you can engineer it, you can change what you get dopamine from. And if you can change what you get dopamine from, and you become in control of that, your whole life changes. You're no longer a slave to the alcohol. You're no longer a slave to the sleeping in, the ice cream, the junk food, the binge watching Netflix, the porn, the video games, the drugs, whatever it is. You're no longer a slave to those things because you've bypassed the cheap dopamine and you've engineered new, higher quality standards that allow you to get some of that dopamine. Sometimes you drink, sometimes you play video games, sometimes you watch TV, but it's engineered to a specific standard, right? The other thing with engineering those standards that's extremely important is to have them linked to key performance indicators as well, right? So if you finish your whole work week and you did your work week well, and you got all five workouts in, and you stuck to your nutrition plan 5 days out of the week, Monday through Friday, you were an absolute freak beast. You made gains, you killed it. Then guess what happens? If that's linked to a certain set of standards, then on the weekend, you can have a glass of wine. You can watch some TV. You can play some video games. You can go out and enjoy your time, but it's got to be linked to a standard, right? Most people have no standards. Most people literally are just fly by the seat of their pants. They'll do whatever they want. They'll play video games all night long and then sleep in and then be late for work and then get off work and then go straight to the bar and eat a pizza and drink 16 Canadians. You know how many people I worked in a bar for many, many, many years. That was so many of my regulars' lives. My regulars lived to be in the bar drinking 16 Canadians on a Wednesday night and eat pizza and then go to sleep at like 1 a.m., late for work the next day, getting fired, finding a new job, getting fired again, taking extra unemployment. Like, I'm serious, man. People live like this. If you don't want to live like that, and that's an extreme example. Most people don't live like that. But if you don't want to live like that, if you want to truly have a purposeful life, if you truly want to find a way to be motivated all the time, like the people that you see on social media or the people that you see that are motivational speakers, how do you think those people are motivated all the time? They engineer it They engineer what they get dopamine from. They build visions that are so powerful that they launch out of bed like a bat out of hell. And they sprint from 5 a.m. in the morning, 4 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning, and they don't stop until the day, all of the goals of the day have been achieved. Engineer it. Okay, guys, now the last thing that I want to talk about is consistency, right? And to touch base on consistency, I want you to understand something. Your negative thoughts, your vices, your demons, your temptations, your distractions, they never go away. That little voice in your head that makes you feel like you're not worthy, that little voice in your head that tells you that you're not enough, that little voice in your head that believes that you can't make it to the next level, that you deserve to be fat, that little voice never leaves. It never leaves. The vices, the drinking, the drugs, maybe you have a control on it now, but it never leaves, right? The temptation for other women, the temptation to watch porn, the temptation to do all of these things that men do in secret, it never leaves. Okay. The only way to stay truly driven, hungry, and focused for the next level, the only way to truly stay hungry, driven, and focused for the next level, and to consistently and adequately each and every day reach it, is to continue to deny them. And the only way to deny them is through consistency. Okay. We've got to stay consistent on a daily basis. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you're listening to the podcast right now and you're loving it so far, I'd appreciate a review. To those of you watching live, drop me some fire, drop me some hearts. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.